Welcome to the Stephen McCain podcast, where every week I bring you people doing world-class things in the field of human optimization and performance. This week's episode is all about the supplement called Spermidine, the amazing anti-aging supplement with a terrible name. It targets 9 of the 12 known pathways of aging. I just don't believe if you care about aging, you can ignore this supplement. In this episode, I interview an expert on Spermidine. Her name is Leslie Kenny, and she is the founder of Oxford HealthSpan, and they make a premier Spermidine supplement. You're going to find out why theirs is the best and most complete Spermidine supplement on the market, and she's going to give us all a 15% discount. So, let's get into this podcast, and by the end of it, you're going to be able to safely and confidently know how to supplement with Spermidine. Let's do this. Leslie, welcome to the Stephen McCain podcast.
Thank you so much. It's really an honor to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, we have been chatting back and forth on Instagram because you were going to Japan, and I think we both we realized a real deep adoration for Japan and the culture and the food and all that. And so I was really excited. I'm like, I really just can't wait to talk to her, not only about your trip, but also about this amazing supplement company that you have built. And I mean, when it comes to Spermidine, that's what we're talking about here. And maybe you can explain that it's more than that. But I keep finding, it seems like, that it does so much more than just autophagy. It hits all of these tenets of aging, and it's so exciting. And I thought, well, who better to have on the podcast than you, who's a Harvard graduate, right? You're probably like, oh, don't you? But I know you're very humble. But I would like to start with your origin story as to how you got into this, because you have a very interesting story. And I think it would be very inspiring for the listeners to hear about it, if you're comfortable sharing it.
Sure, absolutely. Well, for me, it began when I was diagnosed with multiple autoimmune conditions at the age of 39. And I was also going through IVF treatment at the same time, and noticed that my hands began to hurt when I was using scissors or turning doorknobs, things like this. And I thought, gee, it feels like what I imagine arthritis would be like, but I'm only 39. It's too early. Nevertheless, let's have it checked out. And the doctor, I was living in Boulder, Colorado at the time, and the doctor's office, I was used to the IVF clinic calling me to say, oh, your blood tests are back. They're fine. And in this case, the doctor, her office called, but she was the one on the other end of the line and said, your results are back, but you need to come in so we can talk about them. And I knew that something serious must be behind that call, and sort of braced myself for not great news, but I wasn't expecting terrible news. So she did say that 100% on your diagnosis of arthritis, what you have is rheumatoid arthritis. And here are a box of immunosuppressants that you can inject into yourself to suppress your overactive immune system. And she did then go into explain how an overactive immune system is not a good thing because it's not properly identifying self from non-self. So my body is indiscriminately attacking my joints in this case. And then she said, but you've also got lupus. And I said, okay. And so what's the cure for that? Or what's the treatment for that? And she said, unfortunately, there is no treatment for that. And I proceeded to say, well, this is actually inconvenient because I'm doing an IVF round and I kind of need a cure or a treatment or management or something. And really, there's no treatment? Are you sure there's no treatment? And I'm looking at the certificates, the frame certificates behind her on the wall thinking, You're the expert. I'm paying you to solve my problem. I'm outsourcing my problem to you. Fix it. And she's saying, I'm very sorry, but there isn't anything. So then I go to plan B, which is the test wrong? Maybe the test is wrong.
Mhm.
Could it be a false positive? And she says, no, no, your cytokines, your TNF alpha, there's just so many of these things, CRP, everything is sky high, not possible. Okay, can I take this test again? Because let's try and just do more, because maybe if we do more, we'll get a different answer. And she said, well, yes, you can. Your insurance will cover that. So come back and you can do it later. And I thought, right, I'm going to leave and I'm going to learn everything I can about whatever this illness is that I've never heard of. And I'm going to throw the kitchen sink at it. And we're going to
Yeah.
take that test again and we're going to pass with flying colors because this is an unacceptable answer. It's
Yep.
so inconvenient. I need to have a baby right now. So I then began to dig into this and I saw that in fact both of these autoimmune conditions, they often occur together and their root cause is inflammation and dysregulation of the immune system. So I thought, if I can remove things that are causing inflammation in my body, maybe that will help. So I went on an anti-inflammatory diet. That was Dr. Barry Sears's zone diet at the time, and removed dairy, removed gluten from my diet. And at the same time, I thought philosophically, because I'm half Taiwanese, um, Taiwan is that island with all the missiles pointed at it at the moment.
Yeah.
Um, from an Eastern philosophical point of view, rather than suppressing something, the attitude would be, let's balance it instead, right? You have no light without dark, no dark without light. Let them coexist together, let them be in balance. And I thought, why suppress the immune system? Why not just bring it back to homeostasis? And with that in mind, I began to look at more research and discovered a treatment called intravenous immunoglobulin, or IVIG, that was experimental at the time, but seemed to have promise. And I thought, well, she had told me when I said, I really need to get a cure for this because I'm doing my 5th IVF and I'm using donor eggs. So this has to work. She said, don't bother. You have a good 5 years left. Do not do this. And looking at IVIG and having other immunologists in Britain and in the United States say, oh, it's very risky, I thought, I have no other choice, really, right? Why not? What is the downside? I'll die a little
Yeah.
earlier. So why not go for it? And that may have been foolhardy, but in my case, it did pay off. And since that time, there have been more and more studies showing that in the case of autoimmunity, IVIG is helpful. Interestingly enough, in some cases of bipolar, it's helpful because the question then is bipolar mental health or is it inflammation of the brain? So it seems that intravenous immunoglobulin helps with inflammation and helps with regulating the immune system so it better identifies self from non-self,
Yeah.
possibly helps it regulate itself in terms of better identifying pathogens as well. So
Yeah.
this ended up working great for me, and I went back to her to do the test again, and she said, when the results came in, she said, "Well, look at that. Your results are clear. You don't have any of these things." Of course, I was
Wow.
overjoyed, but the penny dropped. Hey, doctors don't know everything. We put them on
Yep.
these pedestals. We outsource our power to them. We expect them to create miracles when, in fact, a lot of the responsibility, the burden needs to be on us as patients too. And we need to
Yeah.
really meet our physicians halfway. They don't have all the answers. They have answers that they have been given from textbooks, and they're very good at saying, at diagnosing you have lupus, there is no cure, but they don't know absolutely everything. So I'm living proof that you can reverse some of these things, at least in the case of the RA and the lupus. Now, what I didn't realize was that I had also had Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and it had
Oh,
already
wow.
destroyed too much of my thyroid. So I've lost about 7/8 of it and will, be on thyroid hormone for probably the rest of my life. That's desiccated pig's thyroid. But
Mhm.
um, I subsequently went on to have a biological child, no interventions needed. It just everything went back into perfect balance. My hormones went back into perfect balance once I went on the desiccated thyroid. I've never had my joints, my hands. I don't have any of the nodules that people associate with arthritis.
Yeah.
I don't have any of the aches and pains that you might otherwise have, and I feel quite healthy. People say I look reasonably healthy for my age. I'll be 58 in June.
Yeah, you look
And
amazing for your age.
well, thank you. And
Thanks.
I feel amazing. That's the more important thing is that I feel
Yeah.
amazing. I feel vibrant and vital and like I am just interested in waking up every day and learning more things and experiencing life, right? Living a life of
Yeah.
joy. And
Yeah.
I think that's what we all want as we, go into our 60s, 70s, and 80s. We're all looking for that joie de vivre, right?
Yeah.
So once you realize the power that you yourself have with your own body, and you actually experience its innate wisdom to heal and to come back into balance. I mean, there's so much less friction for the body when it is in balance
Mhm.
then you can't really look at medicine or health the same way. Now, I'm not talking about acute situations where you have a car accident. Obviously, you
Yeah.
must, you're not going to be able to heal from that on your own. But for chronic illnesses, things like diabetes or these autoimmune conditions, there are
Yeah.
things that we patients can do. And
Yeah.
when I moved to Oxford, England, which is where I live now, and was taking my children to their schools, waiting to collect them. At the end of the day, I would strike up conversations with other parents, as you do, and couldn't believe the intellectual firepower that surrounded me. And people would tell me about the interesting experiments they were doing. One person was, "Oh, I've got a lithium mimetic called Epsilon for bipolar," or "I have, I'm using transcranial electrical stimulation to beat
Uh-huh.
depression," or "I'm using stem cells to regenerate the heart." And I'm thinking, okay, this is amazing. How do I get a hold of this? Or how do I help my friends get a hold of this? And they would always say, "No, not interested in doing a company. I just want to publish. And, I'm not a business person." And so I'd say, "Well, why don't I help you?" And that was how I got into Oxford science, really, was inadvertently just befriending people and saying, "That sounds like a cool idea. Let me help you. I'm not charging you. Let's just see what we can
Wow.
do. Let's throw spaghetti on the
Yeah.
wall," as it were.
Yeah.
And it was through that ecosystem that I then was introduced to two really extraordinary scientists, Professor Katja Simon and Dr. Ghada Al Saleh at the Kennedy Institute for Rheumatology. Because they were working in rheumatology, which I naturally, as a recovered or in remission rheumatoid arthritis patient, I was interested in, um, I heard about their work using this awkwardly named molecule, spermidine, to regulate the immune system and basically rejuvenate the elderly immune system. So that's a quote from a paper that was published in eLife by both of them. And that is, I'm not making any claims here. That was just in vitro in a petri dish with elderly human cells, but it was very exciting. And because spermidine occurs in food, we even manufacture it in our tissues and in our gut biome, but we can eat it in high quantities in things like Japanese fermented soy. natto,
Mm.
tempeh. We can get it in shiitake mushroom. It's in the endosperm of all seeds, so things like wheat germ. Because it's natural, but it has this powerful effect, I thought, well, that's sort of fantastic, isn't it? Because we can all avail ourselves of this. But the folks at the university spin out, it was a spin out group that has about $1 billion behind it. They said, unfortunately, you can't patent this. And yeah,
Because it's
you could
food,
come out with
right?
a supplement. It's a food. So who cares
Yeah.
about a food, right? Because no pharmaceutical company will be interested because they can't protect it. Why would they do clinical trials on it when
Yeah.
there's no way to defend somebody else coming in and just saying, "Oh, right, you've done all the clinical trials, you've shown that spermidine works, so we're going to start making claims with shiitake mushrooms or something."
Yeah.
And I
Well, I
I
mean, but really
said,
it shows there's an opportunity there if something is overlooked that's very powerful, right? Or has some real
that
promise.
that's what that was my feeling, because I'm looking at it from the point of view of a patient. I want this. In the first instance, I wanted it for immune health. But when I looked more deeply into it, I realized that actually spermidine activates autophagy, which is Greek for self-eating. It is the cell's way of cleaning up all of the damaged mitochondria, organelles, proteins inside the cell. It helps with stem cell dysfunction. It helps with shortened telomeres. So I wanted, I wanted spermidine for these other benefits once I learned about them, and thought it's almost too good to be true. What's the downside of popularizing a food derived supplement that just has concentrated amounts of this ingredient in it?
Yeah.
And so that's, it's sometimes it's one of those things where someone say, okay, who's going to do this? And you hold up your hand and you say, oh, sure, I'll do it. Why not? And I did. And I did. I think I've done it with a lot of enthusiasm, because selling spermidine, it has a terrible name. A lot
Yeah,
of people
but
get past the name.
we might as well just real quickly address for anyone that doesn't know, because they're probably thinking, is it associated with sperm? And I think it was found under a microscope a long time ago, right? And
Correct.
probably from sperm, and that's where they noticed that it was first discovered, right? So they just use
Exactly.
that name. Okay.
They did. They
Yeah.
did. So, yeah. So it was discovered in the 17th, late 17th century by a Dutch linen merchant named Antony van Leeuwenhoek. And why by a linen merchant? Because he was fed up with having his linen, his asset, being eaten by moths. And so he
Hmm.
needed to have developed some kind of a tiny glass, like a microscope or magnifying glass, to better see the larvae in the cloth that he bought so that he didn't lose his investment. And that initial magnifying glass ended up becoming a microscope. And under the microscope, he was not only able to see the larvae of the moths, but he was also able to put things like hair, nails, skin, and naturally, as you cast about in your study for other things to put under, you think, well, I'll put urine, I'll put semen under the
Yeah.
microscope. So put it on a glass, shoved it underneath this microscope, and he could identify these crystals that occurred in semen that were there after that dried. And he didn't know what it was, but he called that spermine. So spermine is also derived from amino acids, just like spermidine. And it is part of a class of molecules called polyamines, which just means they come from amino acids.
Yeah.
And um, spermidine and spermine, and then an equally unpleasantly named polyamine called putrescine, they actually are part of what's called the polyamine pathway. It's
Yeah,
just
and the
the
putrescine
ick
kind of is
factor is
probably
terrible.
from the smell of it, right? The
Correct.
putrescine
Absolutely right.
yeah,
Putrid.
yeah,
Yes,
because it's
absolutely.
it's all about
Absolutely.
fermentation, right? It's about
Yes.
something is
Yeah.
fermenting. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Interesting.
you don't it's funny because actually bananas have high amounts of putrescine. You don't want so much. Um, and what's great about how it occurs in something like wheat germ, all three of them occur naturally in wheat germ, but you have high amounts of spermidine, then, like say it's a ratio of 7 to 4 to 1. You have some more spermine, and then you have a very tiny amount of putrescine. But putrescine is a precursor to both of those other polyamines. And spermine has a superpower too, which is that it is important in DNA methylation, which helps turn our genes on and off. So we do want
Interesting.
that superpower too. Yeah. And
Yeah.
so if you can get it from food, you have all three of these as nature intended, which is fantastic. Whereas I know that there are some synthetic products out there. People are like, okay, give me the street drug. I just want this synthetic, two-dimensional mimetic of this because it's really
Yeah.
cheap. It costs pennies from China. And I always think, why do we think that we're better chemists than plants? They've been here a
Yeah.
billion years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Even when you think of like vitamin C, there are these compounds in the skin of the orange,
Yes.
let's say, that help with the bioavailability of all this. So the more plant material in its organic state you can get, the more
Yeah.
synergism of activity I think it provides,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. And some of that is because of when those plant fibers actually go into the gut biome, then you create the gut biome manufactures metabolites. And some of these metabolites are mimetics of insulin, of serotonin,
Mm,
or they're manufacturing B vitamins, which are very helpful
yeah,
with stress, but also you know, with hair or gray hair
yeah,
reversal or, strength of hair because B7 is biotin, which of course helps with strength of hair and nails. So there are all these magic tricks that the gut biome can do, but we need that whole plant in order to unlock it because whenever we feed ourselves, we're not just feeding us, we're feeding a multitude of billions of bacteria, maybe
yeah. We're actually
trillions,
feeding
right?
more of something else than we are feeding ourselves in in a pure cell to cell comparison, right?
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. And people get very freaked out when you say that the gut biome, the bacteria in the gut biome actually have more DNA than we have, right?
Yeah,
Which is,
yeah. It's a hard
uh,
concept to imagine.
it is.
You know, it's
It is.
kind of mind boggling.
It's mind boggling. And what's also mind boggling is that this has been passed down from generation to generation over millennia. It's all from our mothers, right? Because as we pass through the birth canal, and the head passes, pushes on the cecum, then we are given that first dose, those first colonies of
Yeah.
bacteria. And that interestingly enough needs to be fed by indigestible fiber. And you know where we get it? Breast milk. So about
Hmm.
half of breast milk is made up of fructooligosaccharides, not digestible by the baby, only digestible by the gut biome, by those
Interesting.
mitochondria in the gut, right? And
Wow.
it's absolutely fascinating, and it does make you wonder if the breast milk that the mother is making is specifically to feed the colonies that she has just bequeathed to the baby.
Yeah.
I think there's probably an argument for that because there's some great studies out of Spain on how the amount of polyamines in breast milk actually changes depending on the stage of life that the baby is at. So if you have a
Wow.
preterm baby, that baby gets much higher amounts of polyamines than a baby that is delivered at full term. Why?
Hmm.
Because those polyamines are needed for faster cellular turnover for growth.
So interesting. I've also heard that if you have a C-section versus a traditional birth, that child doesn't get to pass through all of that and get that beneficial bacteria. And so they, a lot of times later in life, are more prone to certain things because these bacteria are protect us, right? And I
Yeah.
don't think we ever get a second chance at getting those particular bacteria, the B infantis or whatever it is, like when you're younger. I think that once you lose that, and that's why going on these high dose rounds of antibiotics and just destroying your microbiome is a lot of times sets you up for continuous issues ongoingly. And I'm always a big advocate of try to do it in any other way you possibly can. And that's like the last resort if you have to go on antibiotics. But I remember when I was coaching a team of athletes and they would get, as soon as they had anything, a little bit of a cold or anything, they would just go get antibiotics from the doctor. Like literally, they were
Mm.
throwing them antibiotics constantly. And I'm like, oh, but I still think we're so early in the realm of bacteria and truly understanding it because you're dealing with numbers that are so large to try to understand, trillions.
Yes,
But this is
trillions. It really is
fascinating.
trillions. Yeah.
And let me ask you this.
Very,
So,
very true.
yeah, let me ask you this because your product, since it's more of a natural, similar to food compound,
It is
does
food.
that
Yeah.
help yeah, does that help you with your endogenous production of spermidine versus
Yes.
just trying to exogenously get it?
Yes,
Yeah,
because
okay.
and that's one of the reasons why we formulated it the way that we have. It's both half of the material in there, so it's around 930 milligrams of powder. Half of that is actually the highly concentrated defatted polyamine powder. So the spermidine, and putrescine from wheat germ. But the other half is actually a fructooligosaccharide, and it's made from a particular type of beet. It is classed as a maltodextrin, but don't get too excited. It's not a sugar because it actually releases very slowly into the bloodstream. So it becomes a resistant starch once it takes over 120 minutes to release into the bloodstream, or it is over 70% fiber. And that fructooligosaccharide is in there because this is how it is in breast milk, right?
Yeah.
And we can use that FOS to selectively feed two strains of bacteria in the gut biome that we know manufacture spermidine for you. And that is really important. Why waste the body's own ability to create these amazing and powerful polyamines when we're young, we're able to do this. Now, I can't
Yeah.
bring tissue production of these polyamines back up. I don't know how we would do that, but the gut biome is such a miraculous bit of machinery that is so ignored. And bringing that back online, and you can do this little magic trick with other strains of bacteria too, but you just need to feed it prebiotics, not necessarily probiotics, but prebiotics, because we
Yes.
often think, oh, I'll just take this probiotic. And they have done studies where people who take probiotics, but then are not feeding those colonies the fibers that they need to
Yeah.
survive, you go back and you test these people again a month later, and those colonies are wiped out if you
Yeah.
cease to take the probiotic, right? So, in
Yeah.
fact, we need both. We need the colonies and we need food to sustain the colonies. It's kind of like thinking about pilgrims and the early colonies, in the United States, and people were just dying of famine. Well, your gut biome, those bacteria will also die of famine if you don't give them fiber.
Yeah. They are completely subjected to your circadian rhythm, your eating patterns,
Yeah.
what you eat. I mean, you don't wanna piss them off. I mean, really, at the end of the
Yeah.
day, I mean, even if you're eating, like, antibiotic-laden meat, you're probably gonna piss off your bacteria, right? Because that
You
stuff is
will.
gonna make its way through there, and it's one of those things that I think gut issues are really out of control right now, and we talk about autoimmunity, your story was so inspiring, I have to tell you. They always say, and I don't know if this is 100% true or not, but from what I've researched and stuff, that autoimmunity always starts in the gut. And when you think about things like glyphosate that's in the rainwater, it's all over the place. It doesn't matter if you're eating biodynamic food. there is going to be some glyphosate that has gotten into that food just because it's so omnipresent in the world right now. And that's known to rip tears in the gut lining. And as soon as you get something that's a food passing through that shouldn't, or some particle or some pathogen, and it makes its way into the bloodstream, the body's going to attack it and write an antibody. The antibody is a wanted dead or alive sign that says, if you see this, kill it on spot. But the problem is some of these foods resemble our own body, right? Like a nut might resemble your thyroid at a small molecular level, and it confuses your immune system, especially when your adaptive immune system, which is the one we're talking about, spirals out of control and is out of balance. And I did want to say this real quick because your story pinged me about a real personal story that, my partner went through a autoimmune condition where super rapid heartbeat, hyperthyroidism. They diagnosed her with Graves' disease. And we found an endocrinologist in Beverly Hills, sharp guy, but practicing traditional medicine, which I call antiquated medicine for lack of a
Mm.
better word. It's not derogatory. It's the old school. And I said, listen, I've just been schooled on peptides. I've taken a course from Dr. Seeds, and we talked about modulating your immune system. I'm going to do some peptides with her. Do you mind overseeing this? And just letting me do it because you know how to test for the antibodies in the blood better than, I don't know how to do that. I don't know exactly what to look for. He said, sure. 2 months, we gave her thymosin alpha 1, BPC 157, TB 500. And within 2 months, this thing cleared up. And
Wow.
he was like, I mean, I guess you didn't have it. I guess it was just a thyroiditis or something. And you know what they do for this disease? They
I know.
ablate
It's radiation.
your
Yeah.
yeah, they take it
Yep.
out, and so then you're on thyroid medication for the rest of your life, and it
Yep.
just wasn't even an option. And I was so fortunate that I had been into this stuff enough to put the pieces together because it was all hands
Yep.
on deck at that point. And,
Yep. Well done.
well, thank you. I mean, it's one of those things that, when you have those experiences, everyone in this industry that I talk to, everyone that is doing something in this, they all have that story. They
Yeah.
all
It's what drives
have it.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I was really inspired by your story. And anyone who's going through something right now that's listening to this, there is a way. You just got to keep turning over stones, and you've got to just keep
Yeah.
an open mind and talk to a lot of doctors that are doing integrative and functional medicine, and they're doing continuing educational
Yeah.
seminars and going to advanced things because
Yeah.
we're able to do things that we couldn't do in the past. But I
I agree.
appreciate you
I
listening to that
agree.
story.
No, no, it's a wonderful story, and people like uh, people like Dr. Sandy Kaufman are really pushing the edge on this. With her
Oh yeah.
books and things, she's really helping empower people learn about this. Of course, with peptides, the seeds course, that's fantastic. I didn't know you were a seeds practitioner. That's fantastic. And
Well,
thymosin alpha one is great.
yeah, I mean, it helps the body say, "This is me and this is something else," right? It really allows them to separate the 2, and, you just don't get sick. Like, I keep that on hand constantly, more in the fall and the winter, or if I'm gonna get on an airplane and go on a trip, I'll just take a dose of thymosin alpha 1 and just to kind of button myself up, and
Mhm.
fantastic. I think I'm gonna open the World Peptide Conference this year in Malibu.
Ooh,
I think I'm gonna be the motivational speaker to get everyone fired up, so I'm super excited about that. Yeah.
fantastic. Oh, I
Yeah,
have to
so
go.
yeah,
That would be extraordinary. That's wonderful.
yeah,
Well,
it's it
and
pe
the philosophy again is around modulating, not
yeah,
suppressing. Like you said, oh well, let's ablate the thyroid. Let's radiate it. Let's destroy it. Same with oh, the immune system's out of whack. Let's suppress it. In an acute
yeah, that's
case, yes, but not for the long term. You've got to
yeah.
get to the root cause, and you have got to bring the body back to homeostasis.
And appreciate the fact that the body really is so intelligent and knows how to heal. When you get a cut on your finger, you don't have to do anything except keep that thing from getting infected. The body knows that's the innate immune system, right? Like it just knows how to do it. And the body is infinitely intelligent. So it's about that homeostasis. We're 30 minutes in and I want to start getting to because I'm really excited about your product. I'm using it. I thank you for sending me some. And I would like to
Absolutely.
talk a little, yeah, I would like to talk a little bit about the different anti-aging mechanisms or let's say tenets that spermidine hits on. We've talked about autophagy, that's cleaning up the cells and maybe getting rid of some old machinery to build new machinery and things like that, and taking out the garbage. I always say it's like if you had a party at your house and there was dishes and drinks, empty containers everywhere and plates and just stuff was all messed up. You need to spend an hour or two cleaning up your house after a party. Well, most of us are just living at a full-time party, eating whatever we want, just activating mTOR all day long, right? We're just going crazy. And it's like something like this can say, no, 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 no. It's time to take out the garbage, so to speak, right?
Yeah. And what's interesting is that autophagy and spermidine itself not only activates autophagy, but it activates mitophagy. So this is
Oh,
taking out the
wow.
garbage when it comes to mitochondria. There's something called lipophagy. It does the same thing with lipids. Virophagy does the same thing with viruses. There's also something called ferritinophagy, which helps. Sometimes people are very high in ferritin and low in iron. Well, you need spermidine to help unlock the iron that is in the ferritin stores. So it has all of these other autophagy superpowers, which is
Wow.
quite exciting. But at the same time, we know that if we look at a framework around aging, since 2013, there has been a paper called The Hallmarks of Aging, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And that posited 9 different pathways down which we age. And those were things that I've already alluded to, like stem cell dysfunction, mitochondrial dysfunction, shortening of telomeres, epigenetic changes, impaired proteostasis, impaired intercellular communication. Those things all are hit by spermidine. So you can inhibit them. There are levers that you can sort of pull on to
Wow.
sort of slow the rate at which you age, right? Now, there are a few others that were in that original paper. DNA protection and repair, altered nutrient sensing, and cell senescence, which we could not show proof, spermidine slowing those down. But what we could do was we could show, Katja and Gada could show that spermidine um, actually hit on immune senescence. So you talked about the the immune system earlier, and what we know is that when we're young, the immune cells are sort of trained by the thymus on how to properly function. As we get older, the thymus actually turns to fat. And
Mm.
they say that there's a fellow here at Oxford um, who is a thymus expert, and he says that the thymus is kind of like the University of Oxford, and it continually trains these immune cells. But as it
Uh,
turns to fat, the students come in, but they actually don't learn very much, and they forget how to behave. And what has been shown with spermidine is that you can actually you can get rid of these senescent immune cells, and you can actually retrain them, as it were, which is kind of, for me, as an autoimmune patient, sounds like the holy grail,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that's very exciting. But technically, those last 3 hallmarks of aging, DNA repair, altered nutrient sensing, cell senescence, we don't say that spermidine does those, only immune senescence. Now, since the time of publication in 2013, there's been an updated paper for the 10th anniversary of that paper. A new paper came out adding 3 additional hallmarks of aging, and none of these are going to surprise you or your listeners, and they certainly didn't surprise me. Gut dysbiosis. like leaky
Oh,
gut.
yeah.
You already
Yeah.
talked about how this is where these autoimmune conditions come from, right?
Yeah.
You have these particles of food, proteins, undigested proteins. They go into the bloodstream. The body says, "Oh, right, that's doesn't say that's a nut protein. That says that looks like foreign, and it resembles the proteins on the thyroid. Let's attack."
Yeah.
The other additional one that they have identified is inflammation. You're an athlete. You know all about inflammation, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So so that's the second new one, and the final new hallmark, the 12th hallmark is impaired autophagy itself. So these new 3 hallmarks, all 3 of them are inhibited by spermidine. Put those together with the other 6 that it inhibits, and you're looking at 75% of the pathways, the known pathways down which we age, can be slowed by this great molecule, right?
Wow.
And
That's a
that's
force
really
multiplier.
exciting. Yes,
Yeah.
it is. And what we know is that there's crosstalk between these hallmarks, and that if you actually can influence one, there is spillover effect on the other. And I like to say it's kind of like having that messy party house, post-party New Year's party house that you talked about. You could clean it up on your own, but if you hired a team of cleaners and window washers and people just to hoover up the floor, how much faster and how much better could you clean that house? And that's kind of what it is. It's like having 9 housekeepers come in, clean up a bunch of things, and it's suddenly like, yeah, okay, there's still stuff to clean up, but the body is able to do more now, right?
Yeah, and you get it cleaned up faster, right? So less damage
Yeah.
is done. That's so interesting.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's what really excites me about this. Now, I can talk about these abstract hallmarks of aging till I'm blue in the face. The vast majority of people are like, "Yeah, whatever. Am I gonna see
Yeah.
this?" They don't care.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what they
Well,
do
let
care about is looking in the mirror and seeing something change, and that also
it
happens with this.
yeah, I just spoke at this event. It was amazing. Blue Heron, this big builder here that does these crazy, awesome custom homes in Vegas, and it was about longevity and anti-aging. And I said they had all these different rooms where you could try all these different things, and they were all like really good products. I have pretty much all of them and use them. And I told them, I said, here's the thing: when you weave this stuff into your life, it's not some big thing. I'm not doing this stuff all day long. It's just woven into my life. I said, you start to notice after 10 years go by of doing this that you're separating and pulling away from the people that you are your friends or that you know, and you start to literally start to see that, oh my God, I'm aging slower than everyone around me. And it's
Yeah.
and you go, oh my God, this stuff works. And unfortunately, some of these things are happening at the cellular level where it's not like, I think you said, you're not going to have fireworks with taking spermidine. You take it and you're like, oh my God, I feel absolutely amazing. But it's one of those things that it's working under the hood. And if you stay with it over some course of time, you will start to go, I think this is really working. And then you'll get to the point where like, I know this is working. What I'm doing is unequivocally having an effect on my life.
Yeah.
And so anyone listening, sometimes, when you have someone like Leslie here, who went to Harvard, who is around all these people in Oxford, who comes across this supplement that hits 9 of the 12 hallmarks of aging, and the degree which I can tell and on your website that you guys have scrutinized the quality of this product and the fact that it isn't synthetic, you're doing it in its most natural form. At some point, if you care about aging, this is a done for you turnkey solution right now. I mean, here it is. This is what you do, and you just, so let's talk about the dosing. So when someone gets this, I know that the serving size is 3 pills, right? And that equals a milligram, right? And should you
Correct.
ramp up into that? Should you kind of work your way up
Yeah.
into that?
Yes, yes, with both of our Spermidine products, and the reason why, let's say, Spermidine Original, which is what you're taking, that has a fructooligosaccharide. For people who say have been on the carnivore diet or not used to eating a lot of plant fiber, and unsurprisingly, a lot of Americans are not used to eating a lot of plant fiber. They may think that they do, but our diets are so
Yeah.
processed that actually we don't get a lot. And so, if you take a fructooligosaccharide and you're not used to plant fibers, you might experience a little bit of discomfort in the GI tract, a little bit of bloating. That's because your body is getting used to the fibers again. So, we actually recommend that you titrate up to the 3 capsule full dose of 1 milligram. And day one, you take 1 capsule and take it with food. And then day two, assuming you have no issues in the GI tract, you go up to 2. And day 3, you go up to 3. Now, why 1 milligram? Because that is the amount, that is the minimum effective dose that has been shown to improve memory and cognition. So we're really looking for that kind of an impact. And then the European Food Safety Authority has also set an upper limit of 6 milligrams of food derived supplemental spermidine. So we didn't want to go past that higher range of 6. We do know that clients are taking more and they do get good results. There's a woman in San Francisco who is taking, she's taking, I think, 5 milligrams a day, but she's had really good results with gray hair.
Oh,
Now,
wow.
you really have to titrate up. If you are going to do that much, I would never suggest, I would actually strongly recommend people not to do that from the get go because you will feel it. It's something that the gut needs to get used to over time, right?
Yeah.
So that's why that particular dose. And we use the same dose with our gluten-free product, which is derived from a very special strain, an unusual strain of chlorella that unusually has no iodine, rare for chlorella.
Huh.
And we have paired that with 2 other autophagy activators, nobilitin, which comes from an Okinawan lime, and it's from the peel, but that
Okay.
lime is it's kind of like bergamot, but it has more more of this autophagy activating molecule nobilitin than bergamot does. And then we've got an autumn turmeric in there, which has curcumin, and curcumin is also it supports autophagy too. So
Yeah.
we have a minimum of the 1 milligram, but then we added in a couple of autophagy activators just to, see if we could enhance it. And that one has no gluten in it.
So that would be good for somebody who's intolerant or has celiac or something like that, right? That's a good
Yeah, or
choice for them.
SIBO, for instance. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you've got leaky gut, active leaky gut, I would say don't do Primidine Original only because it could exacerbate things.
Yeah.
And you want to, you probably want to, seal up the gut lining before you do anything else. Now, spermidine itself has the superpower of closing up the tight junctions of the gut. That's actually one of the reasons it's so important in breast milk, it has this function of closing up the lining of the baby's nascent gut, and
Yeah.
as well as activating the immune cells in the gut, so you prevent allergies in those babies later. But in adults, it also will tighten up those so-called tight junctions.
Nice. Interesting.
That Yeah.
And is there should you cycle this at all, or is it the kind of thing that it's totally fine, in your opinion, to just be on it indefinitely? I mean, I've been on certain things for 12 years consistently that I know work, and, I have no problem with that. Is this one of those compounds?
This is one of those compounds that we actually do need. Now, if your body is capable of manufacturing this just through your diet, then fantastic. But your body has a demand for it. And there will be certain moments in your life where the body will demand more and you should actively increase the amount that you're taking in. And I would argue, um, when you're breastfeeding is one of them, for
Oh,
instance, because the woman is giving all of her polyamines to the baby, right? And this is why some
interesting.
women, because polyamines are needed also for hair growth, it's why some women, when they're breastfeeding, they end up losing hair. But another
Hmm.
time would be if you're fighting off infection. So I talked about virophagy and the ability of spermidine to activate virophagy. So if you think of autophagy as the sequestration or basically the bagging up of old cellular parts, virophagy is the bagging up of viruses. And when you have a virus, could even be, well, it could be any kind of virus. Your body will take the spermidine in your body and they will use it to activate virophagy to fight off the virus. You might find afterwards that you lose hair. Why? Because the
Interesting.
body prioritizes and says, okay, we have this limited amount of spermidine. We're going to use it to fight off this infection. Sorry, hair and scalp, but we're not giving you any. We don't care actually if you lose any because you're not essential to the survival of this organism.
Yeah.
And the body is always thinking about the survival of the organism. And it's very interesting with, again, breastfeeding mothers that the body actually prefers to give those polyamines to the baby,
Yeah.
survival
It's
of the next
almost
generation.
Yeah, I guess you could look at it as, spermidine insurance. So, yeah, you
Yeah.
might have some times in your life where you have enough, but nobody is I mean, we're all fluctuating. We all have stressful days. One bad night of sleep can really screw up all the resources in your body in terms of like, everything gets shuttled to, certain things, especially with stress. Your libido and all the non-essential activities go down when you're
Yeah.
really stressed out, and so
Yeah. And it
that's
can
maybe a
turn
good
you
way.
into a pre-diabetic,
Yeah,
loss of
exactly.
sleep for, right?
Absolutely, 100%. So, maybe a good way of looking at this is that it's spermidine insurance so that you have the most possible, faculties to really safeguard against those 9 hallmarks of aging.
That's
Fantastic.
how I like to think of it. That's how I like to
Yeah.
think of it. And of course, I always tell everyone, don't forget food sources. Try to optimize your food sources of these polyamines. It is no wonder that all of the longevity blue zones around the world are getting high amounts of these polyamines into their diet. So if we look at the Okinawans, and I was just in Okinawa, Japan, they're eating huge amounts of plant fiber. It's the traditional diet, and I'm talking about the modern Okinawan diet, which very sadly has been taken over by A&W root beer, Baskin Robbins, and
Oh,
Spam.
no.
I know, it's
No.
gross. We do have an
Oh,
American Air Base there, but so I think it came with the airmen. But
yeah.
if you look at the traditional diet, something like 66% of the traditional diet is made up of purple sweet potato, which it has positive benefits on the gut biome. That's a carb, right?
Yeah.
And I know a lot of us are very anti-carb, but it's a slow carb. So
Yeah.
it's not spiking their blood glucose, and it is feeding the fiber in those sweet potatoes is feeding their gut biome, allowing them to manufacture all of these things so they can live in good health and enjoy long life. Um, Pretty much the rest of it is plant fibers. Now, if we look at, say, the Sardinians or the Nicoyan Peninsula in Costa Rica, or the Icarians, they have actually much more in the way of fermented dairy. So, goat's milk cheeses, for instance. Well, you have a fermented food, whether it is sauerkraut or kimchi or mature cheese, you're going to get spermidine in there too. And so they're getting this that way. So you could also get it from kefir too. So all of these populations of, great long life and health are all getting lots of spermidine in their diets. And you can also look at, say, a healthy 90-year-old, and you can look at their gut biome, and they will still be manufacturing spermidine the way that a healthy 50-year-old is.
I saw an interesting thing. I don't want to derail you, but I saw this thing that really pinpointed something. It was something like from 60 to 80, most people have spermidine less than they did when they were 50. But if they're 90 years
Yep.
old, they have as much as they had when they're 50, meaning that there must be some longevity aspect to this.
Yes.
Is that
Correct. So unfortunately, we go through poor health in that 60 to 80-year-old period. And if I talk to Kacha and Gata about this, they'll say, yeah, it's a lot of it is immune related, but of course, there's also cardiovascular component. There's a
yeah,
neurological component, and so that population of 60 to 80-year-olds are beginning to lose their ability to activate autophagy. They have lost the gut's ability, and the tissue's ability to manufacture spermidine is no longer there. And therefore, as a population, as a cohort, their overall levels of spermidine are lower than those of a 50-year-old. But they die off. The ones who are unhealthy, who have lower levels, will die off. So that by the
yeah,
time you've got this cohort of healthy 90-year-olds, their spermidine levels are high.
yeah,
So they were once part of that 60 to 80-year-old cohort, but of the median spermidine levels of that cohort were dragged down by the people who became unhealthy and who weren't able to
yeah.
keep this production up. That's the hypothesis.
Yeah. And in your research, have you seen any cardioprotective benefits of it? I've seen that it can slow down or stop the progression of atherosclerosis, which is pretty amazing. Have you come across any
Yeah,
of
it
that at
is.
all?
So we know that cardiomyocytes in the heart will preferentially take up spermidine. And one thing not everybody knows about the heart is that heart cells, there isn't cardiovascular plasticity the way that there is neural plasticity. We're not replacing throughout our life, we do not replace our cardiac cells, um, at least not very many. Has not been
Unless you're doing
shown.
stem cells,
And
right? Or something like that,
right,
injecting in that
yeah.
area.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that is something that we don't know. No, bear in mind, of course, that for many years we thought there was no neural plasticity, and now we know that's possible. But with this preference for spermidine by the heart, again, the hypothesis is it is to keep it healthy, to basically rejuvenate the existing cells, to get rid of the debris, right? So it's
Oh, okay.
maintenance,
Yeah.
it's cell maintenance. And that's what
Yeah.
autophagy is doing. So if you have a limited number of cardiac cells and you're not going to be replacing them, you want to take good care of them. So you want that regular maintenance to be done.
Yeah.
That's that is the
Yeah.
again the working hypothesis there.
Wow. Look, we have shown enough on this. And by all means, I always say go do your own research and verify these things. I think your website illustrates a lot of the benefits, and you've really done a good job of, well, what if I'm intolerant to this? Or what about comparing this to liposomal, and we've talked about the
Yeah.
food quality of the prebiotics.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I think this is a good primer for somebody to be armed with what they need to take the next step with spermidine. And you've been kind enough to set me up and give me an affiliate code. So anyone that's interested in trying this, I'll put a link in the show notes for everything we talked about, but also a link to where you can buy her Primadine supplement and get 15% off using the code Stephen with a PH, 15. So Stephen with a PH 15. And look, I'm sold. And I saw you speak years ago at a conference online. I just got, I think it might have been Dave Asprey's. And I was really impressed with your presentation. And I thought, wow, because I had been dabbling a little bit in spermidine and knew about the autophagy, but I didn't know that it had such an overarching effect on so many pathways of keeping us bulletproof for aging. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing this stuff with us.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It was exciting to hear you talk about the benefits you had seen,
Y-
with
yeah.
hair.
Yeah. I get a lot of people that come to me and saying, what can I do for hair? What can I do for hair? And hair's a little tricky, right? Because you can have, that's they're also saying that inflammation is really a root cause. There's also the DHT hypothesis. Some people have autoimmune stuff. There's alopecia with dip patches that I've seen cured by fixing autoimmunity. But just to have, I've noticed that the thickness and the lustrousness of, I guess that's how you say it, of hair, of my hair has been, yeah,
Glossiness.
and I look at your hair, and your hair looks amazing, like, you have that luster, so I'm like, I'm not surprised, and I'm meeting with someone tomorrow that I'm coaching, and one of their interests is, I wanna know what to do with my hair, and I'm certainly gonna be bringing up your product, and, I had my mom on it too, because she called me and said, "Oh, I need to do something for my hair, like, I need it," and I was like, "Well, you should take Spermidine," so I sent her out a couple bottles of your product, and so I look forward to seeing more what comes down the pipe in terms of Spermidine and what it's doing, and I also look forward to seeing what you do because you clearly have a knack for picking out something. Your site
That's really sweet.
your site mentions that you're potentially offering other products. Are there other things that you're looking at?
Yes. There are things in the pipeline, but we need to test them to make sure that they
Yeah.
work. And we're really looking hard at these other ingredients from Okinawa, because the Okinawans is very interesting. All these men, they have this thick, dark hair, and they're in their 60s, and these very, very thick eyebrows. And I kept looking around thinking, okay, this is
Yeah.
interesting. Is it just genetic or is it what they're eating? And it's not everybody there who has it because, again, the Western diet has creeped into modern Okinawan life. But those folks who are still, living a traditional life, eating a traditional diet, they look amazing. So I met with our turmeric farmer. I met with our Shikawasa, our Okinawan lime farmer. He's 83 or 86, and these limes, they grow on the sides of volcanic rock like a vineyard, and he's sort of clambering like a mountain goat up the sides of these hills, and I'm thinking, this is also why they're living longer, right? Because
Have a very purpose-centered life. I don't know if anyone's ever seen that documentary about that sushi guy, Euro Dreams of Sushi.
yeah.
Have you ever seen that? It's
Yes, I
amazing, and the
saw a
guy's,
snippet
like,
from
eating,
it.
yeah, and he is just a machine. I'm like, "Oh my god." The purpose, the Japanese are so amazing at really committing to perfecting stuff. We didn't get a chance to talk about our affinity for the Japanese culture and stuff, but we'll have to do that offline sometime because
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm definitely a little bit jealous of the stuff I saw you posting, and I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to be armed with some of this info when I go to Japan because that country had the biggest effect on me. It was the first place I went to as a kid, and I was chased in the streets and treated like I was a superstar because I was a little blonde haired, blue eyed kid. And it just had this profound effect on me. I know you had a similar experience too. Like, we
Yeah,
could,
yeah,
that
yeah.
could be a whole nother, like hour long podcast, I'm sure about that stuff. But,
Yeah, yeah. No,
well,
it's very true. So we are excited about bringing these other molecules that are science-backed from Okinawa, and, just, so impressed with so many things that we could bring, all
yeah,
for the benefit of health, and it's all food derived, which is great. So looking
yeah.
forward to doing that. And also, I do a lot of work with something called the Oxford Longevity Project.org, and we have free webinars there where we're looking at autophagy in relation to different diseases, whether that's
Oh, wow.
dementia and Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, autophagy and fasting, fasting for women, um, and we'll be going into the
Fantastic.
autoimmune condition soon. We've got our first event. This is nonprofit, so it's totally separate from Oxford Healthspan, We've got our first event in Keble College, Oxford, on the Saturday, the 8th of July. It's an all-day session with lunch in hall like Harry Potter.
Oh, wow.
And we have got a great bunch of speakers, including we have the 2014 Ironman winner from Great Britain, so Dr. Tamsin
Nice.
Lewis, and we've got Sir Christopher Ball, who for many years until last year held the Guinness World Record for the highest number of marathons run in the shortest number of days.
Oh,
10
wow.
in 10.
Oh
10
my
marathons in
gosh.
10 days over the age of 70.
Oh my gosh, that sounds brutal. I mean,
That sounds
I
brutal.
thought, yeah, you know who Dr. David Minkoff is? He runs
I've
Body
heard the
Health.
name. Oh,
Yeah,
yes, 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 yes.
yeah, he's done a lot of Ironmans and he's over 70 and I've always been so impressed. He makes great products. He's a big essential aminos advocate. It sounds like you're just surrounded by really fun stuff. I mean, this is the stuff that gets me so excited, so
Yeah, yeah,
I,
me
I
too, me too.
yeah, I look forward to our paths overlapping at some point because I just think that the quality of humans in this space that are doing it literally, like I said, from their own personal story of strife and health and trying to overcome that is just it's so inspiring, and you are one of those people, and, you're brilliant. I mean, and I know people probably tell you that, and I know you're humbled. You seem very humbled, but I really think that this was an incredible opportunity for not only myself, but for my listeners, and look, you have a product that can change the trajectory of their life. That is time is the most precious resource. So if you can basically give somebody more time because you can help them live longer and healthier, that's the greatest thing you can do for somebody, right? I mean, really, at the end of
Well,
the day.
I would never make a claim like that, but what I will say is that autophagy is a way to unlock the body's potential and wisdom, and that is really exciting to me. It's such a powerful concept. Our bodies are much more powerful than any of us could imagine. But we need
Yeah,
to give them the right tools, the right conditions to flourish, just like any plant, right?
yeah,
You can't expect a plant to do well without water and sunlight. And this is just spermidine is just one of those things. I would never say it is the only thing, but it is an important thing. And we should all get more of these powerful polyamines into our life to help unlock our body's potential.
well, I think that is the perfect way to put the cherry on top of this podcast. Again, Leslie, I really appreciate you coming out. For everyone that's listening, check out the show notes. There'll be a link in the description for all the resources and everything we talked about, and that 15% discount on her Spermidine product. Leslie, thank you so much. And I look forward to talking to you in the future on the podcast and maybe some new products you have. And for everyone else listening, thank you so much for joining us today. And we will see you on the next episode of the Stephen McCain podcast. Take care, everyone. Stay healthy.